Welcome, welcome. I am Son of Sonnet, and I will be your reader for today. I'm going to start with this work from Edmund Spenser. The poetical works of Edmund Spenser in 3 volumes. There is another set after this. And all of these works are kept on the wonderful Project Gutenberg for anyone interested in reading on their own. And I have taken a suggestion that I shall read as this particular character, as you see in the bottom right. So then, Edmund Spenser's Faerie Queene, edited by J.C. Smith, Volume 1, Books 1 through 3. Oxford Press University, Amen House, London, EC 4. Introduction. In these volumes, I seek to present a true text of the Faerie Queene, founded upon a fresh collation of the quartos of 1590 and 1596, and the folio of 1609. I shall call these editions by their dates for short. The fragmentary 7th book appeared first in 1609, for the rest of the text is based on 1596. Some typographical peculiarities, long S and O, and superscribed M and N, e.g. fro, way, have not been reproduced, but noted only where they first occur. With these exceptions, the readings of 1596, if not adopted in the text, are recorded in the notes, so that text and notes together amount, in effect, to a complete reprint of 1596. No such completeness has been attempted in recording variants from 1590 and 1609, but all verbal differences are recorded, and all differences of punctuation that imply a different view of the meaning. Mere changes of spelling that answer to no change of pronunciation are, as a rule, ignored, but I have recorded such differences of spelling as seemed likely to interest students of Elizabethan phonology, grammar, and usage. The evidence of these variants must be used with caution in view of Spenser's deliberate archaism, yet I believe that they have some value. I give one instance in each kind. 1. A fluid E sound is indicated by the variants seldom, 1590, seldom, 1596, seldom, 1609, at 1-4-23, 1-5. Syllabic ES is possessives and plural. Syllabic ES in possessives and plurals, which still lingered in the early 1590s, have grown quite strange to the editor of 1609. To this point I shall return. 3. The conjunctions since and sith are used indifferently in 1590 and 1596, choice of one or other form being determined by euphony alone. But 1609 makes a deliberate, though not quite consistent, attempt to appropriate since to the temporal, sith to the causal sense. The attempt, unfortunately, did not avail to save the more primitive form. I have departed from the punctuation of 1596 only where it seemed likely to puzzle or mislead a modern reader. These departures, which are all recorded, are not very numerous. Spenser's punctuation, though by no means sacrosanct, is less arbitrary than might at first appear. But, as Mr. Gregory Smith says of the punctuation of Addison, it has a rhetorical rather than a logical value. We feel its force best when we read the poem aloud. 2 peculiarities are so common that the reader may be warned of them here. 1 is the absence of punctuation with vocatives. The other is the single comma after qualifying phrases. With this warning, I leave these peculiarities, as a rule, unchanged. In the treatment of capitals and in the distribution of Roman and italic type, I have followed the same principle of adhering, wherever possible, to the original text. I have regularized the spelling of proper names wherever the variations seem to be due to the printer rather than the poet. and this is generally the case with double letters. But for many variations and proper names, Spenser was himself responsible. He varied them sometimes for the sake of the meter, as Serena, Serene, or of the rhyme as Florimel, 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 Florimele. In 2 instances, he seemed actually to have wavered or changed his mind. Braggadocchio's name is generally spelt thus in Book 2. In Books 3 and 4 it varies. In 5, 3 it is regularly Braggadocchio. So we generally have Arthagol in Book 3, but Artagol regularly in Book 5. 1609, however, returns to Arthagol. Aiming not as a reprint, but a true text, I have not hesitated to depart from 1596 wherever I believe it to be an error and the error the printer's. But it is no part of an editor's duty to correct, though he may indicate mistakes made by the author himself. There are many such in the Faerie Queene. There are mistakes of fact, of literary allusion, of quantity in classical names, hardly to be avoided by a poet writing far from libraries. There are confusions of personages, or of names of personages within the poem itself. Sir Guyon is confused with the Red Cross Knight in 3:2-4, and with Prince Arthur in 2:8-48, but not in 1609. Emilia with Pena in 4:9 Og. Callapine with Calidore in 6:17. While over Serena, Spenser's confusion becomes comical. He calls her Crispina in 6:3-23 and Matilda in 6:5 Og. Some lines are hypermetrical, some are short by a foot, and there are 2 or 3 broken lines. One of these last, 34-39-17, is certainly intentional, and all may be so. The supposed example of Virgil may have influenced Spenser in this. Imperfect rhymes and concords are numerous, especially in books 4, 5, and 6. There is one form of imperfect rhyme so singular as to deserve a fuller discussion. Its nature will be best seen in an example. Like 2 fair marble pillars they were seen, which do the temple of the gods support, whom all the people deck with garlands green, and honor in their festival resort. Those same with stately grace and princely port, she taught to tread, when she herself would grace, but with the woody nymphs when she did play, or when the flying liberd she did chase, she could them nimbly move, and after fly apace. Here play in 1:7 is rhymed to support, resort, port, sport. Sport is the obvious correction. There are, in all, 9 instances of this singularity in the Faerie Queene. I subjoin them all, citing the rhyme words only. The number following each word shows the line that it ends. In every case, the correction is obvious. Chase should be pray, make, hold, play, sport, prepare, before. I wonder how that's pronounced. You do not tell me, huh? Upheave. Uprear, upheave. Spied, saw, enclose, contain. Times, age, place, stead, as in 1609, meed, hire. The phenomenon may now be described in general terms. In these 9 places, Spenser substitutes for a rhyming word a metrically equivalent synonym which does not rhyme. Our analysts show further that the rhyme scheme of the Spenserian stanza being ABA, BBC, BCC. This substitution only occurs only in the first or last of the B group, or in the first of the C group. It seems as if, borne along on the swell of his meter and the easy flow of his imagination, two words identical in sense and meter but different in sound rose to the poet's mind almost simultaneously, and the one which he meant to reject slips nevertheless from his pen, having been, we infer, the first to occur. This explains why this phenomenon always occurs either in the first word of a rhyme group, where the rhyme is still undetermined, or, if in the last, only in the last of the B group, where the ear has already been satisfied with as many as 3 rhymes, and why it never occurs in the A group, where 2 rhymeless endings would at once have alarmed the ear. I have dwelt on this phenomenon at some length because it is, so far as I know, peculiar to Spenser. I must glance at another, though a rare, source of error. Our sage and serious Spenser was a thoughtful, even a philosophic writer, but his thought is large, simple, contemplative, not acute and analytic. When he has to deal with a subtle or complex situation, he sometimes involves himself inextricably. If any lover of Spenser resents this judgment, let him apply his devotion to explain or amend 2, 5, 12, 11, 8, and 9. To break character, I apologize for not knowing how to read that aloud in a way that makes sense. To me, these passages appear incorrigible. The first mention of the Faerie Queene occurs in a letter of Spenser's to Gabriel Harvey, dated Quarto Nonus Aprilis, 1580. Quote, "I will in hand forthwith," he writes, "with my Faerie Queene, which I pray you heartily send me with all expedition, and your friendly letters and long-expected judgment withal. I have now sent here home at the last," writes Harvey in reply. These phrases show that the parcel of the Faerie Queene had been in Harvey's hands for some considerable time. The poem must therefore have been begun not later than 1579. Now, in 1579, Spenser was an inmate of Leicester House, and the constant associate of Sir Philip Sidney. There is therefore no reason to doubt the assertion of W.L. in his commendatory verses that by Sidney the poem was originally inspired. Harvey's long-expected judgment, when it came, was far from favorable. But the poet was not discouraged, and doubtless took the manuscript with him when he went to Ireland with Lord Grey in August 1580. Though he afterwards spoke of the poem as wild fruit which salvage soil hath bred, there is some reason to think that he had actually written as much as a book and a half before he left England. But though allusions to Ireland are not rare in the Faerie Queene, the first of them occurs in 2916. Moreover, the industry of commentators has discovered in Book 1 only one imitation of Tasso's Jerusalem Liberata, and that doubtful 1731. Undoubted imitations begin to appear in 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 2, 12 blazes with 12 blazes with spoils from the Garden of Armida. Now, the Jerusalem Liberata was published in 1581. An imperfect edition had been issued surreptitiously in 1580. Our next glimpse of the Faerie Queene we owe to Lodovick Brisket, whose Discourse of Civil Life, though not published till 1606, purports to record a conversation held in his cottage near Dublin as early, it would seem, as the spring of 1583. Spenser is one of the interlocutors. He is made to say that he has already undertaken a work which, in its heroical verse, under the title of A Faerie Queene, which work he has already well entered into. The company express an extreme longing after this Faerie Queene, whereof of some parcels had been by some of them seen. Parcels of the Faerie Queene had been seen, it appears, not only by Spenser's friends in Dublin, but by his literary contemporaries in London. 1 V2 is imitated in Peele's David and Bathsheba, date unknown but probably before 1590. 1:7:32 and 1:8:11 are imitated in Act 4, Scene 4, and Act 4, Scene 3, respectively of the second part of Marlowe's Tamburlaine, published in 1590 but acted some years earlier. Finally, Abraham Franz, in his Arcadian Rhetoric, 1588, quotes Spenser in his Faerie Queene 2-book Canto 4. Frank's quotations is the more interesting inasmuch as it shows that by 1588 the FQ had not only been composed, but disposed into its present arrangement of books and cantos so far at least as 2-4. It is worth remarking that all these imitations of and quotations from FQ before it was published are from that part of the poem which we have seen some reason to think was written before Spenser left England. Allusions in the poem shed no certain light on the progress of its composition. There is no reason to suppose that Spenser composed the whole of the Faerie Queene, the FQ, in the order in which he gave it to the world. It is more likely that he worked up many incidents and episodes as they occurred to him, and afterwards placed them in the poem. We know that the wedding of Thames and Medway, which now forms 4:9, is a reduction of an epithelium themesis, which he originally undertook as an experiment in quantitative meter before April 1580. And it seems probable that the legends and court of Cupid mentioned by E.K. in his preface to the Shepherd's Calendar, as well as the pageants, mentioned in the gloss on June, were similarly worked over and incorporated in the Faerie Queene. Combining these pieces of evidence, we receive the impression that for some time after he came to Ireland, Spenser worked but intermittently on the Faerie Queene, resuming the regular composition and arrangement of the poem about the time when he ceased to reside in Dublin. By 1588, the date of France's quotation, he may have already been settled at Kilcolman. There, at least, Raleigh found him in 1589, and was shown in the poem, with the result that in the autumn of that year Spenser accompanied Raleigh to London, and set about the publication of books 1 through 3. The volume was licensed to William Ponsonby on December 1st, 1589. Spenser's explanatory letter to Raleigh bears date January 23rd, 1589, i.e. 1590 NS. In the course of 1590, but not before March 25th, the volume was published. The printing shows some signs of haste. There was a long list of errata, or faults escaped in the print. This list, though not itself faultless, is of paramount authority in determining the text of books 1 through 3. It is cited in the notes as F.E. In 1591, Spenser returned to Ireland, a disappointed man. I fear that Burleigh had taken occasion of the Milesian tone of certain episodes in Book 3 to stir the ashes of an old resentment. The second part of Faerie Queene begins and ends with complaints of misconstruction by that mighty peer. That once back at Kilcolman, he resumed his task. At first the stream of poetry flows languidly. The fable rambles, dispersing its force in many channels, like a river choked with sand. The verse flags. The play of alliteration is fitful, and Spenser essays a new, but to my ear, an unhappy variation in the form of a feminine ending. But presently he gathers strength again under some new influence, which one would fain associate which one would fain associate with his courtship of Elizabeth Boyle. The treatment of Britomart in Book 5 has strong dramatic touches beyond Canto 9, beyond anything in the earlier books. And in the lovely pastoral episodes of Book 6, the poet lives once more in Arcadia. But positive indications of date are very rare. Book 5, Canto 9 must be later than July 25th, 1593, when Henry IV heard that Mass which was the price of Paris, the singular dislocation of the argument to Canto 9. Half of that Spenser meant it to form part of Canto 7, or Canto 12. On the ordinary interpretation of the Amoretti, all these books were finished before, but not long before, his wedding on June 11th, 1594. And on any interpretation they must have been finished by 1595, when Sir Robert Needham brought the manuscript of the Amoretti to London. Yet Spenser may have added and retouched up to the date of publication. For in spite of Sonnet 80, I fancied that when he wrote certain descriptions in Book 5 and 6, Spenser was not only a husband but a father. See especially 5 verse 53, simile of the nurse and infant. 5:53, simile of the nurse and infant. 5:6:14, the child crying in the night. 6:4:18, 23:24, Callapin's treatment of the foundling, which should be compared with Goyen's behavior in a similar situation. 2:1, also 6:4:37, particularly line 8. Now Spenser's eldest child was born in 1595. This may be fanciful. What is certain is that towards the close of 1595, Spenser followed Needham to London with the manuscript of the second part of Faerie Queene. It was licensed to Ponsonby on January 20th, 1596, and published by autumn of that year. James VI took offense at the treatment of Dusa, and had to be appeased by the English ambassador, whose letter detailing the incident is dated November 12, 1596. The new edition was in 2 volumes, the first being a reprint with alterations of 1590. Late in 1596, or early in 1597, Spenser returned to Ireland. In 1598, Tyrone's rebellion broke out. In October, the rebels attacked and burned Kilcolman Castle. Spenser fled to Cork, whence in December he made his way to London, and there, on January 16, 1599, he died. 10 years after his death, a folio edition of Faerie Queene was published by Matthew Lowndes, which added to the 6 books already published 2 cantos of Mutability, which, both for form and matter, appeared to be parcels of some following book of the Faerie Queene, under the legend of Constancy. These 2 cantos, with 2 stanzas of a third, are all that remain of the third part of Faerie Queene. Whether Spenser wrote more is unknown, but the fact that the 2 cantos are numbered 6 and 7 makes it fairly certain that he had at least sketched the whole 7th book. I cannot accept the view that these 2 cantos are an independent poem, in the sense that they were not designed to form part of Faerie Queene. The lines, "And were it not ill-fitting for this file to sing of hills and woods, 'mongst wars and nights," show clearly that they were so designed. That they may have been written independently, in the sense in which the Wedding of Thames and Medway was written independently, I am not concerned to deny. The view that these cantos are spurious is unworthy of serious discussion. If they are spurious, there must have been living in 1609 an unknown poet who could write the Spenserian style and stanza as well as Spenser at his best. For there is nothing of its kind in Faerie Queene superior to the pageant of the months and seasons, and no one who really knows Spenser can doubt that the two stanzas which alone remain of the unperfect 8th Canto came from his heart. The chief critical problem that confronts an editor of Faerie Queene concerns the texts of books 1 through 3. Should the text of these books be based on 1590 or on 1596? I have chosen the latter, and I have done so in the main for a quite general reason. 1596 was produced under Spenser's eye and by his authority. That authority must be held to cover both volumes, not the second only. Behind this we cannot go. The case is quite different with the later quartos of the Shepherd's Calendar, which were produced in Spenser's absence. This general position is confirmed by a minute comparison of 1590 and 1596. To make the more massive changes first, in 1596, Spenser completely remodeled the conclusion of Book 3. Instead of bringing Scumador and Amoret together, as in 1590, he left them still parted, hoping thus to prolong the interest of their story into Book 4, and so to form a link between the two volumes, which he desired to be read as one continuous poem. For this he sacrificed 5 glorious stanzas, one of them the most rapturous that he ever wrote. The 3 stanzas which he substituted are far inferior, as he must have known, but they served his purpose. He also added a new stanza at 1:11:3. He rewrote single lines in the interest of sound or sense. He altered single words or phrases, and he made, what is even more significant, several minute changes of order designed to improve the rhythm. Let me add that most of these changes are more happily inspired than the second thoughts of poets have sometimes been. I hasten to make 2 admissions. The first volume of 1596 was not reset afresh from Spenser's manuscript. It was printed from a copy of 1590. In the nature of the case, where it escapes some of the blunders of its original, it reproduces others and perpetrates some new. Nor did Spenser do more than glance at the proof. The 1596 volumes, as we have seen, were printed rapidly. The poet was busy, and some time as he had for proofreading was given to the new books. I infer that the alterations which he made in 1590 were made not on the proof, but on the copy. In no other way can we account for that combination of author's corrections with printer's errors which marks the first volume of 1596. And this conclusion is strengthened by another consideration. In one of the worst faults of 1596 that it so often ignores F.E. is that it is one of the worst faults of 1596 that it so often ignores F.E. But the significance of the fault has been overlooked. Making corrections on the copy, Spenser did not trouble himself about errors that he had already noted in F.E. Had he made his corrections on the proof, they could not have escaped him. I believe this to be a true account of the relations of these 2 texts. But when all is said, there may remain many places where we cannot pronounce on mere inspection whether an alteration is the author's or the printer's, but must be guided by a calculation of probabilities, inclining, e.g., to the author where there is clear evidence of his hand in the neighborhood of the vexed passage, to the printer where the ductus literarum in both readings is suspiciously alike, The most important of these places are discussed in the critical appendix to Volume 3. Has 1609 any independent authority? In the main, a reprint of 1596, it is certainly a respectable piece of work. In punctuation, especially far more logical and consistent than either of the quartos. The editor seldom fails to show exactly how he understands his text. Our respect for 1609 would be enhanced if we could believe that the editor was Gabriel Harvey, as Todd at one time fancied. But that notion is untenable, and Todd himself abandoned it. We may go further. The editor of 1609 did not belong to the generation of Harvey and Spencer. For this conclusion, I will adduce only one piece of evidence, but it is decisive. In the last decade of the 16th century, syllabic es in possessives and plurals still lingered even in verse not deliberately archaic. But it was strange to the editor of 1609. Sometimes he remarks it, and signalizes his discovery by printing it ez as wounds, or beasts' clothes. Sometimes he fails to remark it, and fills up the syllable by conjecture. Woundas, clothes. Beasters, clothes. Thus, Nighty's children becomes Night's drab children. The earth's gloomy shadow becomes the earth's gloomy shade. He seems, moreover, to have made little or no use of 1590. When, as sometimes happens, a word has been dropped in 1596, he amends by conjecture. Thus, at 1229, for the cool shade him thither hastily got. For the cool shade thither hastily got. For the cool shadow thither hastily got. The few instances in which 1590 and 1609 agree as against 1596 may fairly be set down to coincidence. Yet, I am disposed to assign some independent authority to 1609. The grounds for this view are slight, and may be stated in full. One moment, please. One moment, please. One. At 1:10:20:15, 1609 adds the missing line. It's not 1:5, it's line 5. Adds the missing line. Dry Sean de pass, she parts the floods in tway. 2 at 2:8:48, line 8, it corrects Sir Guyon to Prince Arthur. 3 at 3:50, line 9. It completes the imperfect Alexandrine by adding an erst. At 3:6:45, line 4, it adds a broken line and dearest love to an 8-stanza line. At 4:12:13, line 2, 1596 reads, Thus whilst his stony heart with tender ruth was touched and mighty courage mollified. 1609 reads, Thus whilst his stony heart was touched with tender ruth and mighty courage something mollified. At 5, Proem 11, line 2, it reads, Stead for the non-rhyming place. Of these changes, 2 and 3 are not beyond the capacity of an ordinary editor. Yet it is worth noting that 1609 does not correct other confusions of names almost as obvious as 2. Even the missing line 1, Spenserian as it sounds, might conceivably be editorial. But to add a broken line like 4 seems to be a touch beyond an editor. And 5 is most easily explained by supposing that Spenser altered the text, meaning to omit tender, but left that word standing. 6 is an instance of a phenomenon that has already been discussed. The significant point is that this is the only instance of that phenomenon which is corrected in 1609. An editor who corrected one of these mistakes might be expected to correct others, but the author who perpetrated these non-rhymes would more easily overlook them. The addition of the mutability cantos in 1609 must be allowed to create a prejudice in favor of the view for which I argue. The editor who recovered so much of Spenser's manuscripts may have recovered more. Parcels of FQ, as we have seen, were handed about in London in Spenser's absence. Or, and the form of the variance at 4, 12, 13 makes this the more probable hypothesis, the editor of 1609 may have had a copy of 1596 with some corrections by the author. Finally, it is not impossible that these corrections were actually embodied in exemplars of 1596, which no longer survive. Elizabethan writers were in the habit of correcting sheets as they passed through the press. In FQ itself, I have noted more than a score of places in which the readings of the copies used for this edition differ from those of other copies in the Bodleian or the British Museum, or of copies used by previous editors. The notes of Church, Upton, and Todd show that they have seen copies which differ in minute points from any now available. As the sheets were probably bound indiscriminately, it is possible that no 2 exemplars exactly correspond. The charges of careless collation freely bandied among Spenser's editors are sometimes due to this cause. It remains for me to acknowledge with gratitude the unwearied help that I have received in preparing this edition. First, from my wife, who read 1609 with me twice. Next, from my friend Dr. Sota of University College Dundee, who revised the difficult proofs of books 1 through 3. Last, from an unknown coadjutor, Mr. Ostler of the Clarendon Press, to whose skill and vigilance above all I owe whatever measure of accuracy has been secured. An edition like this has little claim to any higher virtue, yet perfect accuracy even is too much to hope for in the reproduction, by ordinary typography, of the original spelling and punctuation of a poem which runs to more than 35,000 lines. In the critical appendix, I have called attention to 1 or 2 places in which I have noted that what now seem to me to be errors, or on which I have changed my mind since the sheets were printed. I have also to thank Sir James Murray, Dr. Bradley, and Dr. Craigie for information on points of lexicography, and Mr. Charles Cannon for the protracted loan of his copy of the first folio. I will skip the rest of this. Thank you for stopping by. So tell me, would you like me to continue as the orc for the beginning of this poem? Or would you like a different voice? We will be starting properly in a second. Can you believe an introduction took 41 minutes? Well, I can. They can be awfully long. But we shall see. Yeah. Right now, what I am reading this on an HTML on the browser. And basically, if there is something that comes up that is an odd word, I may pull up the dictionary application and type something in order to understand it or whichever. The pop-up for that dictionary may not appear. Let's say I did this. You do at least see that, and it will attempt at least to give a definition. So that definition may appear on the screen, should we need it. And you can always chime in if you want more. Personally, I think just testing for my own voice, probably need to take a second and just relax a little bit. Relax my throat just a second, because it's one thing to support your voice, it's another to try and be an orc. And sometimes these affectations can create stress on the vocal cords. So 1 second, please. All right. All right. I'm going to change this so that I will not have the character on the screen. So I'm just going to read as normal, all right? Let's do our best and have some fun tonight. Thank you for joining me. The Faerie Queene, disposed into 12 books. Fashioning moral virtues. London, printed for William Ponsonby. To the most high, mighty, and magnificent Empress removed for piety, virtue, and all gracious government, Elizabeth, by the grace of God, Queen of England, France, and Ireland, and of Virginia, defender of the faith, and her most humble servant, Edmund Spencer, doth in all humility dedicate, present, and consecrate these his labors to live with the eternity of her fame. The first book of the Faerie Queene, containing the legend of the Knight of the Red Cross, or of Holiness. Lo, I the man, whose muse whilome did mask, as time her taught in lowly shepherd's weeds, am now enforced of far unfitter task, for trumpets stern to change mine oaten reeds, and sing of knights and ladies' gentle deeds, whose praises having slept in silence long, me all too mean the sacred muse reads. To blazon broad amongst her learned throng, fierce wars and faithful loves shall moralize my song. Help then, O Holy Virgin, Chief of Nine, thy weaker novice to perform thy will. Lay forth out of thine everlasting shrine the antique rolls,
which there lie hidden still, of fairy knights and fairest Tanaquil, whom that most noble Briton prince so long sought through the world, and suffered so much ill, that I must rue his undeserved wrong. O help thou my weak wit, and sharpen my tongue. O help thou my weak wit, and sharpen my dull tongue. And thou most dreaded imp of highest love, fair Venus' son, that with thy cruel dart, at that good knight so cunningly didst rove. That glorious fire it kindled in his heart, lay now thy deadly heaven bow apart. And with thy mother mild come to mine aid. Come both, and with you bring triumphant mart, in love's and gentle jollities arrayed, after his murderous spoils and bloody rage allayed. And with them eke, O goddess heavenly bright, mirror of grace and majesty divine, great lady of the greatest isle, whose light like Phoebus' lamp throughout the world doth shine, shed thy fair beams into my feeble eyne, and raise my thoughts too humble and too vile to think of that true glorious type of thine, the argument of mine afflicted style. The which to hear vouchsafe, O dearest dread awhile. One second, please. Alrighty. The introduction to a poem like this can largely be, it's the dedication, it's to talk generally about the work as a whole and to give some reflection upon who it's for, etc. and everything. So it's not that he's down bad. But we can reflect on this in a second. So, let's pull this up again. So, lo I, the man whose muse whilom did mask, as time her taught in lowly shepherd's weeds, and now enforced. He's talking about what kind of poem it is. And when he says, O Holy Virgin, he's talking about the Virgin Mary. Or rather, he might be... Well, I'm sorry, that's my first assumption. I might be wrong there. Sorry. I will, from this point, I shall refrain on my speculation and analyses. However, it is not against the common tradition to have the intro tell you, yes, sounds like a prayer, it does. It is very much giving the context and the praise of the whole thing. This is such a grand story, it is too big for us to properly contain within this theatrical space. So we beg your patience as we do so. Things like that. But also, as an epic poem, it's important to kind of give that tone setter of the essence of the play and what effectively is inspiring you. So it's not the story proper, but it's an important device. And it would be fun to analyze this more thoroughly later. But I shall refrain. I must try to get through the whole thing at the very least, even if we do not completely understand it. By the end, we shall do our best. We shall at least appreciate it. Canto 1. The patron of true holiness, foul error doth defeat. Hypocrisy him to entrap, doth to his home entreat. A gentle knight was pricking on the plain. He clad in mighty arms and silver shield, wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. Yet arms till that time did he never wield. His angry steed did chide his forming bit, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full ilely knight he seemed, and fair did sit, as one for knightly gusts and fierce encounters fit. As one for knightly guests and fierce encounters fit. But on his breast a bloody cross he bore, the dear remembrance of his dying lord, for whose sweet sake that glorious badge he wore, and dead as living ever him adored. Upon his shield the like was also scored, for sovereign hope, which in his help he had. Right faithful true he was in deed and word, but of his cheer did seem too solemn sad, yet nothing did he dread, but ever was he dread. My apologies. I had an extension installed to try and help with definitions, but unfortunately, Merriam-Webster dictionary does not properly have definitions for certain archaic spellings, so it's not working like I wanted it to. Upon a great adventure he was bound. Upon a great adventure he was bound. That greatest Gloriana to him gave. That greatest glorious queen of fairy land, to win him worship and her grace to have, which of all earthly things he most did crave, and ever as he rode his heart did earn, to prove his puissance in battle brave, upon his foe and his new force to learn, upon his foe, a dragon horrible and stern. A lovely lady rode him fair beside, upon a lovely ass more white than snow. Yet she much whiter, but the same did hide, under a veil that wimpled was full low. And over all a black stole she did throw, as one that inly mourned, so was she sad, and heavy sat upon her palfrey slow, Seemed in heart some hidden care she had, and by her in a line a milk-white lamb she lad. So pure and innocent as that same lamb, she was in life and every virtuous lore, and by descent from royal lineage came, of ancient kings and queens that had of yore their scepters stretched from east to western shore, and all the world in their subjection held, till that infernal fiend with foul uproar forwasted all their land and them expelled, whom to avenge she had this night from far compelled. Behind her far away a dwarf did lag, that lazy seemed in being ever last, or weary with bearing of her bag of needments at his back. Thus as they passed, the day with clouds was sudden overcast, And angry love and hideous storm of rain did pour into his leman's lap so fast that every wight so shrouded did constrain. And this fair couple eke to shroud themselves were fain, enforced to seek some covert night at hand. A shady grove not far away they spied, that promised aid the tempest to withstand, whose lofty trees, y-clad with summer's pride, did spread so broad that heaven's light did hide, not pierceable with power of any star. And all within were paths and alleys wide, and all within were paths and alleys wide, with footing worn and leading inward far, fair harbor that them seems, so in they entered are. And forth they pass, with pleasure forward led, joying to hear the birds' sweet harmony, which their enshroud from the tempest dread, seemed in their song to scorn the cruel sky. Much can they praise the trees so straight and high, the sailing pine, the cedar proud and tall, the vine-prop elm, the poplar never dry, the builder oak, sole king of forests all, the aspen good for staves, the cypress funeral, the laurel, mead of mighty conquerors and poets sage, the fire that weepeth still, the willow worn of forlorn paramours, the yew obedience to the bender's will, the birch for shafts, the sallow for the mill, the myrrh sweet bleeding in the bitter wound, the warlike beech, the ash for nothing ill, the fruitful olive and the platane round, the carver holm, the maple's seldom inward sound. Led with delight, they thus beguile the way, until the blustering storm is overblown, when weening to return whence they did stray, they cannot find that path which first was shown, but wander to and fro in ways unknown. Furthest from end then, when they nearest ween, that makes them doubt their wits be not their own. So many paths, so many turnings seen, that which of them to take, in divers doubts they been. At last resolving forward still to fare, till that some end they find or in or out, that path they take, that beaten seemed most bare, and like to lead the labyrinth about, which when by tract they hunted that throughout, at length it brought them to a hollow cave, amidst the thickest woods. The champion stout eftsoons dismounted from his courser brave, and to the dwarf a while his needless spear he gave. Be well aware, quoth then that lady mild, lest sudden mischief ye too rash provoke. The danger hid, the place unknown and wild, breeds dreadful doubts. Aught fire is without smoke, and peril without show. Therefore your stroke, Sir Knight, withhold, till further trial made. Ah, lady, said he, shame were to revoke the forward footing for an hidden shade. The forward footing for an hidden shade. Virtue gives herself light, through darkness for to wade. Yeah, but, quoth she, the peril of this place, I better wrought than you, though now too late, to wish you back return with foul disgrace. Yet wisdom warns, whilst foot is in the gate, to stay the step, ere forced to retreat. This is the wandering wood, this error's den, a monster vile, whom God and man does hate. Therefore I read, beware. Fly, fly, quoth then the fearful dwarf, this is no place for living men. But full of fire and greedy hardiment, the youthful knight could not for aught be stayed. But forth unto the darksome hole he went, and looked in. His glistering armor made a little glooming light, much like a shade, by which he saw the ugly monster plain, half like a serpent, like half a serpent horribly displayed. But the other half did woman's shape retain, most loathsome, filthy, foul, and full of vile disdain. And as she lay upon the dirty ground, her huge long tail her den all overspread, yet was in knots at many bouts unwound. It was in knots at many bouts upwound. It was in knots and many bows upwound. It was in knots and many bows upwound. Pointed with mortal sting. Of her there bred 1,000 young ones, which she daily fed, sucking upon her poisonous dugs, each one of sundry shapes, yet all ill-favored. Soon as that uncouth light upon them shone, into her mouth they crept, and sudden all were gone. Their dam upstarts, out of her den afraid, and rushed forth, hurling her hideous tail about her cursed head, whose folds displayed. Their dam upstart, out of her den afraid, and rushed forth, hurling her hideous tail about her cursed head, whose folds displayed were stretched now forth at length without entrail. She looked about, and seeing one in mail, arms to point, sought back to turn again, and for light she hated as the deadly bale. I want in desert darkness to remain, where plain none might her see, nor she see any plain. Thank you for the comment. I will try not to cast any spells. Which when the valiant elf perceived, he leapt as lion fierce upon the flying prey, and with his trenchant blade her boldly kept from turning back, and forced her to stay. Therewith enraged she loudly gan to bray. And turning fierce her speckled tail advanced, threatening her angry sting, him to dismay. Who not aghast, his mighty hand enhanced, the stroke down from her head unto her shoulder glanced. Much daunted with that dint, her sense was dazed, yet kindling rage herself she gathered round, and all at taunts her beastly baud raised, and all at once her beastly body raised, with doubled forces high above the ground, though wrapping up her wreathed stern around. Leapt fierce upon his shield, and her huge train all suddenly about his body wound, that hand or foot to stir he strove in vain. God help the man so wrapped in error's endless train. His lady sad to see his sore constraint, cried out, Now, Sir Knight, show what ye be. Add faith unto your force, and be not faint. Strangle her, else she sure will strangle thee. That when he heard, in great perplexity, his gall did grate for grief and high disdain, and knitting all his force got one hand free, wherewith he gripped her gorge with so great pain, that soon to loose her wicked bands did her constrain. Therewith she spewed out of her filthy maw a flood of poison horrible and black, full of great lumps of flesh and gobbets raw, which stunk so wildly that it forced him slack his grasping hold. And from her turn him back. Her vomit full of books and papers was, with loathly frogs and toads, which eyes did lack, and creeping sought way in the weedy grass. Her filthy paw-break all the place defiled has. As when old Father Nihilus gins to swell, with timely pride about the Egyptian vale, his fatty waves do fertile slime out well, and overwell each plain and lowly dale. But when his later spring begins to avail, huge heaps of muddy leaves, wherein there breed 10,000 kinds of creatures, partly male and partly female of his fruitful seed. Such ugly, monstrous shapes elsewhere may no man read. The same so swore annoyed as the night. That well-nigh choked with a deadly stink. His forces fade, he can no longer fight. Whose courage when the fiend perceived to shrink, she poured forth out of her hellish sink her fruitful cursed spawn of serpents small, deformed monsters foul and black as ink, which swarming all about his legs did crawl, and him encumbered sore, but could not hurt at all. As gentle shepherd in sweet eventide, when ruddy Phoebus gins to welkin west, high on an hill, his flock to weaven wide. High on an hill, his flock to weaven wide, marks which do bite their hasty supper best. A cloud of cumbrous gnats do him molest, all striving to infix their feeble stings, that from their noyance he nowhere can rest. But with his clownish hands their tender wings he brusheth off, and oft doth mar their murmurings. Thus ill bestead, and fearful morn of shame, then of the certain peril he stood in, half furious unto his foe he came, resolved in mind all suddenly to win, and soon to lose, before he once would lean and struck at her with struck at her with more than manly force, that from her body full of filthy sin he roughed her hateful head without remorse. A stream of coal-black blood forth gushed from her course. Her scattered brood, soon as their parent dare, they saw so rudely falling to the ground, groaning for deadly, all with a troublous fear, gathered themselves about her body round, weening their wonted entrance to have found at her wide mouth. But being there withstood, they flocked all about her bleeding wound, and sucked up their dying mother's blood, making her death their life, and eke her heart their good. He hath slain the dragon. That detestable sight him much amazed to see the I will stop doing accents. Sorry. That detestable sight him much amazed to see the unkindly imps of heaven accursed devour their dam, on whom while so he gazed, having all satisfied their bloody thirst, the belly swollen he saw with fullness burst, and bowels gushing forth, well worthy end of such as drunk her life, the which them nursed. Now needeth no longer labor spent. Now needeth him no longer labor spend. His foes have slain themselves, with whom he should contend. His lady seeing all that chanced from far, approached in haste to greet his victory, and said, Fair knight, born under happy star, who see your vanquished foe before you lie, well worthy be you of that armory, wherein ye have great glory won this day, and proved your strength on a strong enemy. Your first adventure, many such I pray, and henceforth ever wish that like succeed it may. Then mounted he upon his steed again, and with the lady backward sought to wend that path he kept, which beaten was most plain. No ever would to any byway bend, but still did follow one unto the end. The which at last out of the wood them brought. So forward on his way, with God to friend, he passed forth, and new adventure sought. Long way he travelled before he heard of aught. At length they chanced to meet upon the way an aged sire, in long black weeds he clad. His feet all bare, his beard all hoary grey, and by his belt his book he hanging had. Sober he seemed, and very sagely sad, and to the ground his eyes were lowly bent, simple in show, and void of malice bad, and all the way he prayed as he went, and often knocked his breast as one that did repent. Yes, clad in black garments, described as weeds, just as in poor clothes. And black likely meaning dirty, but may actually mean strictly black in color. He fair the knight saluted, louting low, who fair him quitted, as that courteous was. Who fair him quitted, who fair him quieted, as that courteous was, and after asked him if he did know of strange adventures which abroad did pass. Ah, my dear son, quoth he, how should, alas, silly old man, that lives in hidden cell, bidding his beads all day for his trespass, tidings of war and worldly trouble tell? The Holy Father sits not with such things to mell. But if of danger which hereby doth dwell, and homebred evil ye desire to hear, of a strange man I can tell you tidings. Of a strange man I can you tidings tell, that wasteth all this country far and near. Of such, said he, I chiefly do inquire. And shall you well reward to show the place, in which that wicked wight his days doth wear. For to all knighthood it is foul disgrace, that such a cursed creature lives so long a space. Far hence, quoth he, in a wasteful wilderness, his dwelling is. Far hence, quoth he, in wasteful wilderness his dwelling is, by which no living wight may ever pass. But through great distress, now, said the lady, Now, said the lady, draweth toward night, and well I wrote, that of your later fight ye all for wearied be. For what so strong, but wanting rest, will also want of might. The sun that measures heaven all day long, at night doth bait his steeds the ocean waves among. Then with the sun take, sir, your timely rest, and with new day new work at once begin. Untroubled night, they say, gives counsel best. Right well, sir knight, ye have advised been. Quoth then that aged man, the way to win is wisely to advise. No day is spent, therefore with me ye may take up your inn for this same night. The knight was well content, so with that godly father to his home they went. A little lowly hermitage it was, down on a dale, hard by a forest side, far from the resort of people that did pass and travel to and fro, a little wide, for there was a holy chapel edified, wherein the hermit duly wont to stay, his holy things each morn and evening tide. Thereby a crystal stream did gently play, which from a sacred fountain welled forth alway. Arrived there, the little house did fill, ne look for entertainment where none was. Rest is their feast, and all things at their will. The noblest mind the best contentment has. The fair discourse the evening so they pass, but that old man of pleasing words had star, and well could file his tongue as smooth as glass. He told of saints and popes, and evermore he strode in Ave Marie. After and before. He strode an Ave Marie after and before. The dropping. He strode an Ave Marie after and before. The drooping night thus creepeth on them fast, and the sad humour loading their eyelids. The drooping night thus creepeth on them fast, and the sad humour loading their eyelids. As messenger of Morpheus on them cast sweet slumbering dew, the which to sleep them bids. Unto their lodgings then his guests he rides. Unto their lodgings then his guests he rides, where when all drowned in deadly sleep he finds, he to his study goes, and there amidst his magic books and arts of sundry kinds, he seeks out mighty charms to trouble sleepy minds. Then choosing out few words most horrible, let none them read, thereof did verses frame, with which and other spells like terrible he bade awake black Pluto's grisly dame, and cursed heaven, and spake reproachful shame of highest God, the Lord of light and the Lord of life and light. A bold bad man that dared to call by name great Gorgon, prince of darkness and dead night. At which Cocytus quakes and Styx is put to flight. At which Cocytus quakes and Styx is put to fright. And forth he called out of deep darkness dread legions of sprites, the which like little flies fluttering about his ever-damned head, await whereto their service he applies, to aid his friends or fray his enemies. Of those he chose out two, the falsest two, and fittest for to forge true seeming lies. The one of them he gave a message to, the other by himself stayed other work to do. He making speedy way through spursed air, He making speedy way through spursed air, and through the world of waters wide and deep, to Morpheus' house doth hastily repair, amid the bowels of the earth full steep, and lo, where dawning day doth never peep, his dwelling is, where Tethys his bed, where Tethys his dwelling is, where Tethys his wet bed doth ever wash, and Cynthia still doth steep in silver dew his ever drooping head. While sad night over him her mantle black doth spread. Whose double gates he findeth locked fast, the one fair framed of burnished ivory, the one fair framed of burnished ivory, the other all with silver overcast, and wakeful dogs before them far do lie, watchful to banish care their enemy. Who oft is wont to trouble gentle sleep, by them the sprite doth passing quietly, and unto Morpheus comes, whom drowned deep in drowsy fit he finds, of nothing he takes keep. And Mar, to lull him in his slumber, to slumber him in his slumber soft, a trickling stream from high rock tumbling down, and ever drizzling rain upon the loft, mixed with a murmuring wind, much like the sound of swarming bees, did cast him in a swoon. Of swarming bees did cast him in a swoon. No other noise, nor people's troubles cries, as still are wont annoy the walled town. Might there be heard, but careless quiet lies, wrapped in eternal silence far from enemies. For anyone that is watching this VOD, please leave a comment if you know of any particular browser extensions that are good at locating the definitions of archaic words or archaic spellings. Because right now I have presently the Merriam-Webster extension and set all of that up so it's good for reading articles and having a definition ready, but unfortunately it's not equipped for this reading. Thank you. The messenger approaching to him spake, but his waste words returned to him in vain. So sound he slept, that naught might him awake. Then rudely he him thrust and pushed with pain, whereat he gained a stretch, but he again shook him so hard and forced him to speak. As one then in a dream, whose drier brain is tossed with troubled sights and fancies weak. Is tossed with troubled sighs and fancies weak. He mumbled soft, but would not all his silence break. The sprite then gan more boldly him to wake, and threatened unto him the dreaded name of Hecate, whereat he gan to quake, and lifting up his lumpish head, with blame half angry asked him for what he came. Hither, quoth he, me Archimado send. Hither, quoth he, me Archimago sent. He that the stubborn sprites can wisely tame. He bids thee to him send for his intent a fit false dream that can delude the sleeper's scent. The Archimago. Sorry. The god obeyed, and calling forth straightway. A diverse dream out of his prison dark, delivered it to him, and down did lay his heavy head, devoid of careless cark. Devoid of careful cark. Devoid of careful... cark, okay. Whose senses all were straight benumbed and stark. He back returning by the Uri dale, by the ivory door, remounted up as light as cheerful lark, and on his little wings the dream he bore, in haste unto his lord, where he him left afore. Who all this while with charms and hidden arts had made a lady of that other sprite, and framed of liquid air her tender parties so lively, and so like in all men's sight, that weaker sense it could have ravished quite. The maker herself, for all his wondrous wit, was nigh beguiled with so goodly sight. Her all in white he clad, and over it cast a black stole. Her all in white he clad, and over it cast a black stole, most like to seem for una fit. For una fit. For that. For una fit. Interesting. Cast a black stole. Cast a black stole. Much like to seem for una fit. Cast a black stole, most like to seem unfit. Cast a black stole, most like to seem for unfit. Okay, extra syllables. Or not. Now when that idle dream was to him brought, unto that elfin night he bade him fly, where he slept soundly void of evil thought, and with false shows abuse his fantasy. In sort as he him schooled privily, and that new creature born without her due, full of the Maker's guile, with usage sly, he taught to imitate that lady true, whose semblance she did carry under feigned hue. Thus well constructed to their work they haste. Thus well constructed to their work they haste, and coming where the knight in slumber lay, the one upon his hardy head him placed, and made him dream of loves and lustful play. That night his manly heart did melt away, bathed in wanton bliss and wicked joy. Then seemed him his lady by him lay, and to him plained how that false winged boy her chaste heart had subdued to learn Dame Pleasure's toy. And she herself of beauty sovereign queen, fair Venus seemed unto his bed to bring her. As she herself of beauty sovereign queen, fair Venus seemed unto his bed to bring her, whom he waking evermore did ween to be the chastest flower, that I did spring on earthly branch, the daughter of a king, now a loose layman to vile service bound, and eke the graces seemed all to sing, hymen to hymen, dancing all around, whilst freshest Flora with her dewy garland crowned. Ivy garland crowned. Whilst freshest Flora with ivy garland crowned. It's always the ivy, I apologize. Ah, goodness. In this great passion of unwanted lust, or wanted fear of doing aught amiss, he started up, as seeming to mistrust some secret ill or hidden foe of his. Lo, there before his face his lady is, under Blake still hiding her baited hook, and as half blushing offered him to kiss, with gentle blandishment and lovely look, most like that virgin true, which for her knight him took. All clean dismayed to see so uncouth sight, and half enraged at her shameless guise, he thought have slain her in his fierce despite, but hastily heat tempering with sufferance wise, he stayed his hand, and gan himself advised to prove his sense, and tempt her feigned truth. In women's. Anyway. I'll leave that. To prove his sense and tempt her feigned truth, wringing her hands in women's piteous wise, though can she weep to stir up gentle ruth, both for her noble blood and for her tender youth. And said, "Ah, sir, my liege lord, and and said, "Ah, sir, my liege lord and my love, shall I accuse the hidden cruel fate and mighty causes wrought in heaven above, or the blind God that doth me thus amate, for hoped love to win me certain hate? Yet thus perforce he bids me do or die. Die is my due, yet rue my wretched state. You, whom my heart avenging destiny hath made judge of my life or death indifferently." It's a cool line. "Your own dear sake forced me at first to leave my father's kingdom." There she stopped with tears. Her swollen heart her speech seemed to bereave. And then again begun, my weaker years captive to fortune and frail worldly fears, fly to your faith for succor and sure aid. Let me not die in languor. Let me not die in languor and long tears. Why, dame, quoth he, what hath ye thus dismayed? What phrase ye that were wont to comfort me afraid? Love of yourself, she said, and dear constraint lets me not sleep, but waste the weary night in secret anguish and unpitied plaint, whiles you in careless sleep are drowned quite. Her doubtful words made that redoubted knight suspect her truth. Yet since no untruth he knew, her fawning love with foul disdain spite he could. Her fawning love with foul disdainful spite he would not shed, but said, "Dear dame, I rue, that for my sake unknown such grief unto you grew. Assure yourself, it fell not all to ground, for all so dear as life is to my heart, I deem your love, and hold me to your bound. Nay, let vain fears procure your needless smart, where cause is none, but to your rest depart. Not all content, yet seemed she to appease her mournful plaints. Her mournful plaints beguiled of her art. Her mournful plainties beguiled of her art, and fed with words that could not choose but please, so sliding softly forth, she turned as to her ease. Long after lay he musing at her mood, much grieved to think the gentle dame so light, for whose defence he was to shed his blood. At last, dull weariness of former fight, having rocked to sleep his irksome sprite, that troublous dream 'gan freshly toss his brain, with bowers and beds and ladies' dear delight. But when he saw his labour all was vain, with that misformed sprite he back returned again. Was women's. Yes, there are footnotes at the very bottom of each part. That was Canto 1. How are we feeling so far? We have some characters and symbolism referring to, well, just archetypes of purity, like the woman with her lamb, etc. All that. And the story so far, these characters In summary, if I paid attention properly while reading, is they're on a journey of sorts, on a hermitage. I think I missed if there was a specific reason stated, but they're going on their journey, and they have two different stops, two different adventures in this canto. The first being they stop at a cave and find a dragon there of a very imaginative description, and he slays the dragon and everything. And then they are basically in town and kind of looking for more adventure, if I understood that correctly. And they meet a guy who is an old man, and I think the old man turns out to be an archmage of sorts, and that is going to give them a place to sleep. But while they're sleeping, he summons some pixies, some fairies of sorts, to tempt them in their sleep. And specifically more the man. Specifically more the knight, in this case. Probably just because he has the more obvious weakness. And also he's our hero. So, and of course, there's a misunderstanding between the two. And then basically, he's sort of a little chastised by, apparently, his chastised for having naughty dreams, as it were. That is more or less what I got from that, just reading. All right. And stream has gone for 1 hour and 43 minutes so far. 1 second, please. We have a long way to go. All right, then. Canto 2. The guileful great enchanter parts the red-crossed knight from truth, into whose stead fair falsehood steps, and works him woeful ruth. By this the northern wagoner had set his sevenfold tem behind the steadfast star, that was in ocean waves yet never wet, but firm is fixed, and sendeth light from far to all that in the wide deep wandering are, and cheerful Chanticleer with his note shrill had warned once that Phoebus carry car in haste was climbing up the eastern hill, full envious that night so long his room did fill. When those accursed messengers of hell, that feigning dream, and that far-forged sprites came to their wicked master, and gain tell their bootless pains and ill-succeeding night, who all enraged to see his skilful might deluded so, gan threaten hellish pain and sad Proserpine's wrath. Persephone's wrath, whom to affright, but when he saw his threatening was but vain, he cast about and searched his baleful books again. Eftsoons he took that miscreated fire, and that false other sprite, on whom he spread a seeming body of the subtle ire, like a young squire, in love's and lusty head, his wanton days that ever loosely led, without regard of arms and dreaded fight. Those two he took, and in a secret bed, covered with darkness and misdeeming night, them both together laid to joy in vain delight. Forthwith he runs with feigned faithful haste, unto his guest, who after troublous sights and dreams, gan now to take more sound repast, whom suddenly he wakes with fearful frights, as one aghast with fiends or damned sprites, and to him calls, Rise, rise, unhappy swain, that here wax old in sleep, whilst wicked wights have knit themselves in Venus' shameful chain. Come see, where your false lady doth her honor stain. So basically, he's going to fool the knight into thinking that she is sleeping with someone. All in amaze, he suddenly upstart, with sword in hand, and with the old man went. He soon him brought into a secret part, where that false couple were full closely met, in wanton lust and lewd embracement, which when he saw, he burnt with jealous fire. The eye of reason was with rage blent. I blend. The eye of reason was with rage blent, and would have slain them in his furious ire, but hardly was restrained of that aged sire. Why blent? Returning to his bed in torment great, and bitter anguish of his guilty sight, he could not rest, but did his stout heart eat, and was his inward gall with deep despite, irksome of life, and too long lingering night. At last fair Hesperus, in highest sky, had spent his lamp, and brought forth dawning light. Then up he rose, and clad him hastily. The dwarf him brought his steed, so both away do fly. Now when the rosy-fingered morning fair, weary of aged Tithony's saffron bed, had spread her purple robe through dewy air, and the high hills Titan discovered, the royal virgin shook off drowsy head, and rising forth out of her baser bower, looked for her knight, who far away was fled, and for her dwarf, that wont to wait each hour. Then gan she wail and wept to see that woeful stour. And after him she rode with so much speed as her slow beast could make. And after him she rode with so much speed as her slow beast could make, but all in vain, for him so far had borne his lightfoot steed, pricked with wrath and fiery fierce disdain, that him so follow was but fruitless pain. Yet she her weary limbs would never rest, but every hill and dale, each wood and plain did search, sore grieved in her gentle breast. He so ungently left her, whom she loved best. He so ungently left her, whom she loved best. But subtle Archimedro, when his guests he saw divided into double parts, and Ivna wandering in woods and forests, then of his drift he praised his devilish arts, that had such might over true meaning hearts. Yet rests not so, but other means doth make, how he may work unto her further smarts. For her he hated as the hissing snake, and in her many troubles did most pleasure take. He's like Satan, and he hates her more because she's pure. He then devised himself how to disguise, for by his mighty science he could take as many forms and shapes in seeming wise as ever Proteus to himself could make. Sometime a fowl, sometime a fish in lake, now like a fox, now like a dragon fell, that of himself he oft for fear would quake, and oft would fly away. Oh, who may tell the hidden power of herbs, and might of magic spell? He a hater. But now seemed best this person to put on of that good knight, his late beguiled guest. In mighty arms he was yclad anon, and silver shield upon his coward breast, a bloody cross, and on his craven crest a bunch of hairs, discolored diversely. Full jolly knight he seemed, and well addressed, and when he sat upon his courser free, St. George himself he would have deemed him to be. But he the knight, whose semblance he did bear, the true St. George, was wandered far away, still flying from his thoughts and jealous fear. Will was his guide, and grief led him astray. At last him chanced to meet upon the way a faithless Saracen, all armed to point. in whose great shield was writ with letters gay, sans foi, full large of limb and every joint he was, and cared not for God or man a point. St. George. He had a fair companion of his way, a goodly lady clad in scarlet red, purfled with purfled or purfled? Purfled with gold and pearl of rich assay. Purfled with gold and pearl of rich assay, and like a Persian mitre on her head she wore, with crowns and ouches garnished, the which her lavish lover to her gave. Her wanton palfrey all was overspread with tinselled trappings, woven like a wave, whose bridle rung with golden bells and bosses brave. With fair disports and courting dalliance, she entertained her lover all the way. But when she saw the knight his spear advance, she soon left off her mirth and wanton play, and bade her knights address him to the fray. His foe was nigh at hand. He pricked with pride and hope to win his lady's heart that day, forth spurred fast. He pricked with pride and hoped to win his lady's heart that day, forth spurred fast, adown his courser's side, the red blood trickled, stained the way as he did ride. The Knight of the Red Cross, when him he spied, spurring so hot with rage dispiteous, gan fairly couch his spear, and towards ride. Soon meet they both fell and furious, that daunted with their forces hideous, their steeds do stagger and amazed stand, and eke themselves too rudely rigorous. Astonied with the stroke of their own hand, do back rebute, and each to other yieldeth land. As when two rams, stirred with ambitious pride, fight for the rule of the rich fleeced flock, their horned fronts so fierce on either side do meet, that with the terror of the shock astonied both, stand senseless as a block, forgetful of the hanging victory. So stood these twain, unmoved as a rock, while staring fierce and holding idly the broken relics of their former cruelty. The Saracen, sore daunted with the buff, snatcheth his sword, and fiercely to him flies, who well it wards, and quieteth cuff with cuff. And quieteth cuff with cuff, each other's equal puissance enemies. Puissance. Oh, come on. Puissance. Oh, come on. No others equal puissance enemies. And through their iron sides with cruel spies, does seek to pierce, repining courage yields no foot to foe. The flashing fear flies as from a forge out of fire. The flashing fire flies as from a forge out of their burning shields, and streams of purple blood new dyes the verdant fields. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Curse on that cross, quoth then the Saracen, that keeps thy body from the bitter fit. Dead long ago I wot thou hadst been. Had not that charm from thee forewarned it. But yea, I warn thee now, assured sit, and hide thy head. Therewith upon his crest with a rigour so outrageous he smit, that a large share it hewed out of the rest, and glancing down his shield, from blame he fairly blessed. I apologize for not using a female voice or doing much acting of the characters or the such, but I thought it best perhaps just to focus on reading the language. There are enough obstacles, perhaps. Perhaps that's just a lack of confidence on my part. Thereat wondrous wrath, the sleeping spark of native virtue gan eftsoons revive, and at his haughty helmet making mark, so hugely stroke that it the steel did rive, and cleft his head. He tumbled down alive, with bloody mouth his mother earth did kiss. He tumbled down alive, with bloody mouth his mother earth did kiss, greeting his grave. His grudging ghost did strive with the frail flesh. At last it flitted is, whither the souls do fly of men that live amiss. Gruesome. The lady, when she saw her champion fall, like the old ruins of a broken tower, stayed not to wail his woeful funeral, but from him fled away with all her power, who after her as hastily gan scour, bidding the dwarf with him to bring away the Saracen shield, sign of the conqueror. Her soon he overtook and begged to stay, for present cause was none of dread or to dismay. She turning back with rueful countenance, cried, Mercy, mercy, sir, vouchsafe to show on silly dame, subject to hard mischance and to your mighty will. Her humblest low in so rich weeds and seeming glorious show, did much imove his stout heroic heart. And said, Dear dame, your sudden overthrow much rueth me. But now put fear apart, and tell both who ye be, and who that took your part. Melting in tears, then gan she thus lament, The wretched woman whom unhappy hour hath now made thrall to your commandment, before that angry heavens list to lower, and fortune false betrayed me to your power, was, or what now availeth that I was, born the sole daughter of an emperor, and he that the wide west under his rule has, and high hath set his throne, where Tiberius doth pass. He, and the first flower of my freshest age, betrothed me unto the only heir of a most mighty king, most rich and sage. Was never a prince so faithful and so fair, was never prince so meek and debonair. But ere my hoped day of spousal shone, my dearest lord fell from high honor's stair into the hands of his accursed foe, and cruelly was slain, that shall I ever moan. That was fun. Her blessed body spoiled of lively... Her blessed body, spoiled of lively breath, was afterward, I know not how, conveyed and fro me hid. Conveyed and fro me hid, of whose most innocent death, when tidings came to me, unhappy maid. Oh, how great sorrow my sad soul essayed! Then forth I went his woeful course to find, and many years throughout the world I strayed, a virgin widow, whose deep wounded mind with love long time did languish as the stricken hind. At last it chanced this proud Saracen to meet me wandering, who perforce me led with him away, but yet could never win the fort that ladies hold in sovereign dread. There lies he now with foul dishonor dead, who whiles he lived was called foul sans... who whiles he lived was called proud sans foy. San foy was called... who whiles he lived was called proud sans foy. Livid. Who whiles he lived was called proud sans foy. The eldest of 3 brethren, all 3 bred of one bad sire, whose youngest is sans joy, and twixt them both was born the bloody sans loy. Ah, these names. What wonderful names. Sans foy, sans joy, sans loy. The 3 amigos. The 3 hermanos, that is. In this sad plight, friendless, unfortunate, now miserable, I, Fidessa, dwell, craving of you in pity of my state, to do none ill, if please ye not do well. He in great passion all this while did dwell, more busying his quick eyes, her face to view, than his dullest ears, to hear what she did tell. And said, fair lady, heart of flint would rue the undeserved woes and sorrows which ye show. Henceforth in safe assurance may ye rest, having both found a new friend you to aid, and lost an old friend that did you molest. Better new friend than an old foe is said. With change of cheer the seeming simple maid let fall her eyne as shamefast to the earth, and yielding soft, in that she not gainsaid. So forth they rode, her feigning seemly mirth. And she coy looks, so dainty they say maketh dearth. I'm going to pause for a second. Hands bothering me. You following the story so far? Or do you need me to recap it all? All right. Let's keep going. Long time they thus together travelled, till weary of their way, they came at last, where grew 2 goodly trees, that fair did spread their arms abroad, with grey moss overcast, and their green leaves trembling with every blast, made a calm shadow far in compass round. The fearful shepherd often there aghast, under them never sat, ne want their sound. His merry oaten pipe, but shunned the unlucky ground. But this good knight, soon as he them can spy, for the cool shade him thither hastily got. For golden Phoebus now unmounted he, from fiery wheels of his fair chariot, hurled his beams so scorching cruel hot, that a living creature mote it not abide, and his new lady it endured not. There they alight, and hope themselves to hide from the fierce heat, and rest their weary limbs atide. Fair seemly pleasance each to other makes, with goodly purposes as there they sit, and in his falsed fancy he her takes to be the fairest wight that lived yet. Which to express he bends his gentle wit, and thinking of those branches green to fame, and garland for her dainty forehead fit, he plucked a bough, out of whose rifts there came small drops of gory blood, that trickled down the same. Therewith a piteous yelling voice was heard, crying, "Oh, spare with guilty hands to tear my tender sides with this rough rind embarred, but fly, oh fly far hence away, for fear least you to hap what happened to me here. And to this wretched lady, my dear love, oh too dear love, love bought with death too dear, astonished he stood. Oh too dear love, love bought with death too dear. Astonished he stood, and up his hair did hove, and with that sudden horror could no member move." Just found a tree that used to be a person. At last, when as the dreadful passion was overpast, and manhood well awake, his musing at the strange occasion, and doubting much his sense, he thus bespake: "What voice of damned ghost from limbo lake, or guileful sprite wandering in empty air, both which frail men do oftentimes mistake, sends to my doubtful ears these speeches rare, and rueful plaints me bidding guiltless blood to spare?" Then groaning deep, nor damned ghost, quoth he, nor guileful sprite to thee these words doth speak, but once a man, fraudubio, now a tree. Wretched man, wretched thee, whose nature weak, a cruel witch he cursed will to wreak, her cursed will to wreak, hath thus transformed and placed in open plains, where Boreas doth blow full bitter bleak, and scorching sun does dry my secret veins, for though a tree I seem, yet cold and heat me pains. Fraudubio. Poor man. Fraudubio. Say on, fraudubio, then, or man or tree, quoth the knight, by whose mischievous arts art. Say on, fraudubio, then, or man or tree, quoth then the knight, by whose mischievous arts art thou misshaped thus, as now I see. He ought find medicine who his grief imparts, but double griefs afflict concealing hearts, as raging flames who striveth to suppress. The author then, said he, of all my smarts, is one Duessa, O false sorceress, that many errant knights hath brought to wretchedness. I think I get what's implied there. In prime of youthly years, when courage haunts the fire of love and joy of chivalry, first kindled in my breast, it was my lot to love this gentle lady, whom ye see, now not a lady, but a seeming tree, with whom as once I rode accompanied, me chanced of a knight encountered be, that had a like fair lady by his side, like a fair lady, but did foul Duessa hide. Dun, dun, dun. Whose forged beauty he did take in hand, all other dames to have exceeded far. I in defence of mine did likewise stand, mine, that did then shine as the morning star, so both to battle fierce arranged air. In which his harder fortune was to fall under my spear, such is the die of war. His lady left as a prize marshal. Did yield her comely person to be at my call. So doubly loved of ladies unlike fair, the one seeming such, the other such indeed. One day in doubt I cast for to compare, whether in beauty's glory did exceed, a rosy girland was the victor's meed. Both seemed to win, and both seemed one to be, so hard the discord was to be agreed. Frau Lissa was as fair mote be. Is it Fraylissa? Fraylissa was as fair mote be. Fraylissa was as fair mote be, and ever false Duessa seemed as fair as she. The wicked witch, now seeing all this while the doubtful balance equally to sway, what not by right, she cast to win by guile, and by her hellish science raised straightway. A foggy mist, and by her hellish science raised straightway a foggy mist that overcast the day, and a dull blast that breathing on her face dimmed her former beauty's shining ray, and with foul ugly form did her disgrace. Then was she fair alone, when none was fair in place. Then cried she out, Fie, fie, deformed wight! Whose borrowed beauty now appeareth plain to have before bewitched all men's sight. O leave her soon, or let her soon be slain, her loathly visage viewing with disdain. If soons I thought her such as she me told, and would have killed her, but with feigned pain. The false witch did my wrathful hand withhold, so left her, where she now is turned to tree mold. Thenceforth I took Duessa for my dame, and in the which unweeting joyed long time. And in the which unwitting joyed long time. And in the which unwitting joyed long time, never wished but that she was the same, till on a day, that day is every prime, when witches won't do penance for their crime. When witches won't do penance for their crime. I chanced to see her in her proper hue, bathing herself in organ and thyme. Bathing herself in organ and thyme. Bathing herself in organ and thyme. A filthy, foul old woman I did view, that ever to have touched her I did deadly rue. Her nether parts misshapen, monstrous were hid in water, that I could not see, while they did seem more foul and hideous than woman's shape man would believe to be. Then forth from her most beastly company I gan refrain in mind to slip away, soon as appeared safe opportunity for danger great, if not assured decay. I saw before my eyes if I were known to stray. Oh, that was beautiful. I have to wipe my eyes for tears. I'm sorry. I apologize for my juvenile humor. My juvenile humor. Oh, goodness. That was fun, though. The devilish hag by changes of my chair perceived my thought and drowned in sleepy night with wicked herbs and ointments did besmear my body all through charms and magic might that all my senses were bereaved quite. Then brought she me into this desert waste, and by my wretched lover's side me pight. We're now enclosed in wooden walls full fast. We're now enclosed in wooden walls full fast. Banished from living wights, our weary days we waste. Full fast we waste. No. We're now enclosed in wooden walls full faced. We're now enclosed in wooden walls full faced. Banished from living wights, our weary days we waste. Also fun. But how long time, said then the elven knight. How you in this misformed house to dwell. We may not change, quoth he, this evil plight, till we be bathed in a living well, that is the term prescribed by the spell. Oh how, said he, mote I that well ought to find, that may restore you to your wonted well. Time and sufficed fates to former kind shall us restore, none else from hence may us unbind. The false duessa now Fidessa height, heard how in vain Fra Dubio did lament. And knew well all was true, But the good knight, full of sad fare and ghastly durament, when all this speech the living tree had spent, the bleeding bow did thrust into the ground, that from the blood he might be innocent, and with fresh clay did close the wooden wound, then turning to his lady, dead with fear her found. Her seeming dead he found with feigned fear, as all unweeting of that well she knew, and pined himself with busy care to rear her out of careless swoon. Her eyelids blue and dimmed sight with pale and deadly hue, at last she up gan lift, with trembling chair, her up he took, too simple and too true, and oft her kissed. At length all passed fair, he took... At length all passed fair, he set her on her steed, and forward forth did bear. Mm-hmm. Okay. Story makes sense so far? So to recap... Oh, no, okay. So I'm gonna scroll this down, okay. Alright. Seeing if I can remember this properly, in Canto 2, the Archmage gives an illusion to the knight, George, that the lady he's traveling with is engaging in a carnal act. He's made someone pretend to be her and copulate. And he shows the copulation to the knight, and the knight, seeing what appears to be the lady he's traveling with engaging in a carnal act, because he loves her, he's jealous, and he leaves her with his servant, the dwarf. And then he encounters another warrior figure of sorts, and who I believe may also be an illusion, if I remember reading that right. And this warrior, this other knight, not necessarily a knight, but this other warrior he meets, is traveling with another woman, another lady, and they engage in combat. I forget specifically why. I apologize. I do specifically forget why they engage in combat. And then he hears the story of the woman that was traveling with this warrior, and he hears a pitiful story from her about how she was betrothed to be married. She was being put up to a marriage, and that the man that she was going to be married with died, but that wasn't the man that she was currently with in the story, if I remember that right. Am I paying proper attention to the story right now? Because the man she was to marry was either the warrior she was with, or it was another man and who died, and then she's sort of been looking for or being courted by other men. So anyway, this man that she was with dies in the battle, who I think was still an illusion, was still like not a real person. Someone pretending to be a person, I think. And then then they go to rest in this wood, effectively. Or just to the rest by this spot. It's not necessarily a wood, but there is a tree. And the knight George, if I have the name right, the main character, he plucks a bow from the tree to give as a gift, as a pretty flower or whichever. But when he breaks the bough off the tree, he discovers it's bleeding. And it turns out that there is, and did I read this right? There's mainly one guy. But did I also read that there were two, a man and woman, that were both trees? Or was it just the one? And I'm sorry, I should be paying better attention. I'll have to go over this again. If I remember, it's really just one guy. I don't know. It seemed to reference to a man and woman. So there was Frau Dubio is the man who is a tree. And then he recounts how he was turned into a tree by a witch. And the witch is, I think, presumably, and this is the false duessa, now Fidessa Heights. Where was it? Dang. Well, the false witch tried to seduce the guy, And the guy that was turned into a tree was effectively seduced by a witch. And he kind of found out that she was a witch. And I think she was probably going to do something nefarious to him anyway, but he found out that she was a witch and saw like her true form, which was misshapen and ugly and all that. And then she turned him into a tree, effectively. And I think she pretended to be someone else. And I think that's in like the whole process of this. So I think then it's implying, and I might be wrong, but I think it's implying that the woman that the main character is with right now, who I will keep calling George, that the woman he's with now is actually the witch in disguise. I think that is the implication. But I might be misreading that. Oh, gosh. I feel bad. I'm sorry. It is 10:30 at night. Let me drink. I think kind of specifically, I think that, yeah, the witch is pretending to be the woman that is now with him because she was like pretending to have fainted, after hearing the story and everything. And actually the tree person was also saying, hey, that looks a lot like the witch that cursed me. So I'm pretty sure that's the case with the way the story is going on. So the knight, George, is riding with the witch. I'm going to feel really bad if his name is not actually George, but our protagonist is riding with seemingly a witch, and he's riding with his dwarf assistant, and he's also still being pursued by the true virginal lady that was his partner in the very beginning, who is his true love. And that should be it. All right. Canto 3. Forsaken truth long seeks her love, and makes the lion mild. Mars blind devotion's mart, and falls in hand of lecher wild. And the truth would mean the lady from the beginning, the lady love. The one who is true. Naught is there under heaven's wide hollowness that moves more dear compassion of mind than beauty brought to unworthy wretchedness, through envy's snare or fortune's freaks unkind. Aye, whether lately through her brightness blind, or through allegiance and false fealty, which I do owe unto all womankind, feel my heart pursed with so great agony. With such I see that all for pity I could die. And now it is impassioned so deep, for fairest Venus' sake, of whom I sing. Is it Venez? Unes Venus. Evenes. Well, let's just let the air stand. For fairest Venus' sake, of whom I sing, that my frail eyes these lines with tears do steep, to think how she, through guileful handling, though true as touch, though daughter of a king, though fair as ever living wight was fair, though nor in word nor deed ill-meriting, is from her knight divorced in despair, and her due loves derived to that vile witch's share. Unes? Okay. For fairest Unes' sake, of whom I sing. Okay. Unes. For fairest Unes' sake. Good. And her loves derived to that vile witch's share. Yes, the knight is with a witch right now. Okay. Yet she, most faithful lady, all this while forsaken, woeful, solitary maid, far from all people's prease, as an exile, in wilderness and wasteful desert strayed, to seek her knight, who subtly betrayed through that late vision, which the enchanter wrought, had her abandoned. She of naught afraid, though woods and wasteness wide him daily sought, yet wished tidings none of him unto her brought. One day nigh weary of the irksome way, from her unhasty beast she did alight, and on the grass her dainty limbs did lay in secret shadow, far from all men's sight. From her fair head her fillet she undied, and laid her stole aside. Her angel's face, as the great eye of heaven, shined bright, and made a sunshine in the shady place. Did never mortal eye behold such heavenly grace? It fortuned out of the thickest wood, a ramping lion rushed suddenly. Okay. It fortuned out of the thickest wood, a ramping lion rushed suddenly, hunting full greedy after salvage blood. Soon as the royal virgin he did spy, with gaping mouth at her ran greedily, to have at once devour her tender corse. But to the prey when as he drew more nigh, his bloody rage assuaged with remorse, and with his sight amazed, forgot his furious force. The lion was so smitten by how beautiful she was, he stopped attacking her. Instead thereof, he kissed her weary feet, and licked her lily hands with fawning tongue, as he her wronged innocence did weet. And how can beauty master the most strong, and simple truth subdue avenging wrong, whose yielded pride and proud submission, still dreading death when she had marked long, her heart again melting great compassion, and drizzling tears did shed for pure affection. The lion lord of every beast and failed, quoth she, his princely puissance his princely puissance. Let me go ahead and look up the pronunciation there. Puissance, okay. Quoth she, his princely puissance doth abate, and mighty proud the humble weak doth yield. Forgetful of the hungry rage which late him pricked, in pity of my sad estate, but he my lion and my noble lord, how does he find in cruel heart to hate her that him loved, and how does he find in cruel heart to hate her that him loved, and ever most adored, as the god of my life? Why hath he me abhorred? Redounding tears did choke the end of her plaint, which softly echoed from the neighbor wood, and sad to see her sorrowful constraint. The kingly beast upon her gazing stood, with pity calmed, she down fell her With pity calmed, down fell her angry mood. At last in close heart, shutting up her pain, arose the virgin born of heavenly brood, and to her snowy palfrey got again, to seek her strayed champion, if she might attain. The lion would not leave her desolate, but with her went along, as a strong guard of her chaste person, and a faithful mate of her sad troubles and misfortunes hard. Still when she slept, he kept both watch and ward, and when she waked, he waited diligent, with humble service to her will prepared. And from her fair eyes he took commandment, and ever by her looks conceived her intent. Long she thus travelled through deserts wide, by which she thought her wandering night should pass, yet never show of living wight espied, till that at length she found the trodden grass, in which the tract of people's footing was, under the steep foot of a mountain hoar. Under the steep foot of a mountain hoar, the same she follows, till at last she has a damsel spied slow-footing her before, that on her shoulders had a pot of water bore. Let's see. To whom approaching she to her gan call, to weet if dwelling place were nigh at hand, but the rude wench her answered not at all. She could not hear, nor speak, nor understand, till seeing by her side the lion stand, with sudden fear her pitcher down she threw, and fled away. For never in that land face of fair lady she before did view, and that dread lion's looked her cast in deadly hue. Full fast she fled, ne ever looked behind. Full fast she fled, ne ever looked behind, as if her life upon the wager lay. And home she came, whereas her mother blind sate in eternal night. Not could she say, but sudden catching hold, did her dismay with quaking hands and other signs of fear, who full of ghastly frights and cold affray, gan shut the door. But this arrived there, Dame Una, weary dame, and entrance did require. Which when unyielded, her unruly page, with his rude claws the wicket open rent, and let her in, whereof his cruel rage, nigh dead with fear and faint astonishment, she found them both in darksome corner pent, where that old woman day and night did pray upon her beads devoutly penitent. 900 paternosters every day, and thrice 900 aves she was wont to say. Aves. And thrice 900 aves she was wont to say. I see. And to augment her painful penance more, thrice every week in ashes she did sit, and next her wrinkled skin rough sackcloth wore, and thrice 3 times did fast from any bit. But now for fear her beads she did forget, whose needless dread for to remove away, fair Una framed words and countenance fit, which hardly done, at length she gan them pray, that in their cottage small that night she rest her may. The day is spent, and cometh drowsy night, when every creature shrouded is in sleep. Sad Una drowned her Sad Una down her lays in weary plight, and at her feet the lion watch doth keep. Instead of rest, she does lament, and weep for the late loss of her dear loved knight. And for the late loss of her dear loved knight, for the late loss of her dear loved knight. And sighs and groans the evermore does steep her tender breast in bitter tears all night. All night she thinks too long, and often looks for light. So her name is Una. Do not let me forget that. Now when Aldebaran was mounted high above the shiny Cassiopeia's above the shiny Cassiopeia's chair. Now when Aldebaran was mounted high above the shiny Cassiopeia's chair, and all in deadly sleep did drowned lie, one knocked at the door, and in would fare. He knocked fast, and often cursed and sware that ready entrance was not at his call, for on his back a heavy load he bare, of nightly stealths and pillage several, which he had got abroad by purchase criminal. He was to weet a stout and sturdy thief, wont to rob churches of their ornaments, and poor men's boxes of their due relief, which given was to them for good intents. The holy saints of their rich vestments he did disrobe, when all men careless slept, and spoiled the priests of their habiliments. Was none the holy things in safety kept, then he by cunning slates in at the window crept. And all that he by right or wrong could find, unto his house he brought, and did bestow upon the daughter of this woman blind, Abessa, daughter of Corsica slow. Abessa, daughter of Corsica slow, with whom he whoredom used, that few did know, and fed her fat with feast of offerings, and plenty which in all the land did grow. Nay, spared he to give her gold and rings, as now he to her brought part of his stolen things. Thus long the door with rage and threats he bet, yet of these fearful women none durst rise. The lion frayed them, him to let. He would no longer stay him to adwise. Adwise? Goodness. But open breaks the door in furious wise, and entering is, when that disdainful beast, encountering fierce, him sudden doth surprise, and seizing cruel claws on trembling breast, under his lordly foot him proudly hath suppressed. Advise. I have to swap I's and J's sometimes. I gotta swap U's and V's sometimes. Alright. Him booteth not resist, nor succor call. His bleeding heart is in the venger's hand. His bleeding heart is in the venger's hand, who straight him rent in 1,000 pieces small, and quite dismembered hath the thirsty land drunk up his life, his corse left on the strand. His fearful friends were out the woeful night, ne dare to weep, nor seem to understand the heavy lap which on them is alight, afraid least to themselves the like misshapen might. Now when broad day the world discovered has, up Una rose, up rose the lion eke, and on their former journey forward pass, in ways unknown her wandering knight to seek, with pains far passing that long wandering Greek, that for his love refused deity. Such were the labors of this lady meek, still seeking him that from her still did flee, still seeking him that from her still did fly, then furthest from her hope, when most she weened nigh. Soon as she parted thence, the fearful twain, that blind old woman and her daughter dear, came forth, and finding Queene there slain. Soon as she parted thence, the fearful twain, that blind old woman and her daughter dear, came forth, and finding Queene there slain, for anguish great they gan to rend their hair, and beat their breasts and naked flesh to tear. And when they both had wept and wailed their fill, then forth they ran like two amazed deer, half mad through malice and revenging will, to follow her that was the causer of their ill. To pause and give the briefest of recaps. The lady, Una, has been chasing after the knight. She pauses somewhere, kind of in the woods, in the forest, and then she is encountered by a lion, who at first is going to attack her, but does not continue his assaults because he sees her beauty, and then becomes her companion, her traveling companion. She then goes into the desert, which was where the knight that she's chasing after met the witch. And so she goes there, and she stays with the knight. And while she's sleeping, a thief goes into her sleeping place because she found the place and kind of broke in. But it was his hideaway for storing stolen goods. And then he goes in there, and then the lion mauls him to death. And as they're leaving, people in the town, I don't know if this will be followed up on, but people in the town want revenge on her for the lion killing the thief that still has some personal relationships in the town. So that is the plot so far on her end. And there's a reason why it's a lion. There's a reason why it's responding to her beauty and all that, and why it's being her protector and everything. And just think C.S. Lewis. And I think it's clear enough. Not like... You understand what I mean. Just that these are common symbols that you'll see. All right. In a story, women are too powerful, yes. In a story like this, the pure and good woman is going to be protected by... It will be contrivance of the plot, but it will also be, in a way, by the divine rights, the divine protection. Because in a meta-narrative way, the good should be protected, and the pure should be protected. Whom overtaking, they gan loudly bray, with hollow howling and lamenting cry, shamefully at her railing all the way, and her accusing of dishonesty that was the flower of faith and chastity. And still amidst her railing she did pray that plagues and mischiefs and long misery might fall on her, and follow all the way, and that in endless error she might ever stray. But when she saw her prayers not prevail, she back returned with some labour lost, And in the way, as she did weep and wail, a knight met her in mighty arms embossed. Yet knight was not for all his bragging boast, but subtle archimage that Una sought by trains into new troubles to have tossed. Of that old woman tidings he besought, if that of such a lady she could tell and not. Okay, the Archimage, he's back, pretending to be a knight, and apparently he has business with the witch. Therewith she gan her passion to renew, and cry and curse and rail and rend her here, saying that harlot she too lately knew, that caused her shed so many a bitter tear, and so forth told the story of her fear. Much seemed he to moan her hapless chance, and after for that lady did inquire, which being taught, he forward gan advance his fair enchant. Which being taught, he forward gan advance his fair enchanted steed, and eke his charmed lance. His charmed lance. Ere long he came, where Una travelled slow, and that wild champion waiting her beside, whom saying such, for dread he durst not show himself. That wild champion waiting her beside, whom saying such, for dread he durst not show himself too nigh at hand, but turned wide unto an hill, from whence when she him spied, but him like seeming sailed, her knight by name she weened it was, and towards him gan ride. Approaching nigh, she wist it was the same, and with fearful humbleness towards him she came. So Una, right now, is mistaking the sorcerer for the knight. What do you call himself again? The Archmage. And weeping said, Ah, my long-lacked lord, where have ye been thus long out of my sight? Much feared I to have been quite abhorred, or aught have done, that ye displeasen might, that should as death unto my dear heart light. For since mine eye your joyous sight did miss, my cheerful day is turned to cheerless night, and eke my night of death the shadow is, but welcome now my light and shining lamp of bliss. He thereto meeting said, My dearest dame, far be it from your thought and from my will, to think that knighthood I so much should shame, as you to leave, that have me loved still, and chose in fairy court of mere goodwill, where noblest knights were to be found on earth. The earth shall sooner leave her kindly skill to bring forth fruit and make eternal dearth, than I leave you, my life. Be born of heavenly birth. Then I leave you my life, be born of heavenly birth. And sooth to say, while I left you so long, was for to seek adventure in strange place, where Archimago said a felon strong to many knights did daily work disgrace. But knight he now shall never more deface. Good cause of mine excuse, that mote he please well to accept, and evermore embrace my faithful service, that by land and seas have vowed you to defend. Now then your plaint appease. His lovely words her seemed do His lovely words her seemed do recompense of all her passed pains, when loving hour of many years of sorrow can dispense. A dram of sweet is worth a pound of sorrow. A dram of sweet is worth a pound of sour. She has forgot how many a woeful stour. She has forgot how many a woeful stour for him she late endured. She speaks no more of past. True is that true love hath no power to looken back. His eyes be fixed before. Before her stands her knight, for whom she toiled so sore. Much like as when the beaten mariner, much like as when the beaten mariner, much like as when the beaten mariner that long hath wandered in the ocean wide, oft soused in swelling Tethys saltish tear, and long time having tanned his tawny hide, with blustering breath of heaven that none can bide, and scorching flames of fierce Orion's hound, soon as the port from far he has espied, his cheerful whistle merrily doth sound, and Nereus crowns with cups his mates him pledge around. Such joy Maiduna, when her knight she found, and eke the enchanter joyous seemed no less. Then the glad merchant, that is view from ground his ship far come from watery wilderness, he hurls out vows, and Neptune oft doth bless. To forth they passed, and all the way they spent discoursing of her dreadful late distress, in which he asked her what the lion meant, who told her all that fell in journey as she went. They had not ridden far when they might see one pricking towards them with hasty heat, full strongly armed and on a courser free, that through his fierceness foamed all with sweat, and the sharp iron did for anger eat, when his hot rider spurred his chafed side. When his hot rider spurred his chafed side, his look was stern, and seemed still to threat cruel revenge, which he in heart did hide. And on his shield sans loy in bloody lines was dyed. Sans loy, great. When nigh he drew unto this gentle pair, and saw the red cross which the knight did bear, he burnt in fire, and gan eftsoons prepare himself to battle with his couched spear. Loth was that other, and did faint through fear, to taste the untried dint of deadly steel. But yet his lady did so well him cheer, that hope of new good happy gan to feel, so bent his spear, and spurned his horse with iron heel. As a reminder, Sans Loy is the brother of the man that our knight, the Red Cross knight, George, killed during the battle, as I recall. Or, no, wait. Because Sans Loy is basically the brother of the man that the woman that is now with the knight was married to. I guess in the way that would be the witch, or I forget, the witch was just pretending to be her. Oh, darn it. So anyway, Sans Loy is a character that was mentioned before, and he's one of 3 brothers, and one of those brothers is dead, as I recall. Yes, I believe so. So, yeah, the false Duessa or Duessa was married to the brother of Sanloy, or was with Sanloy, the brother of Sanloy, and the I forget which San it was, because it was like Sans Loy, Sans Joy. Sans Joy isn't the other one that hasn't appeared yet, and there was like Sans Yoy or something. I forget what it was. I apologize. But yeah, basically. So yeah, cool. We got a returning revenge. We got plots lines intersecting. And he's come across the lady, the good lady, Una, while the sorcerer, the archmage, Archimaggio, is pretending to be the knight. So yeah. Yes, and... But that proud Paynim forward came so fierce and full of wrath, that with his sharp-edged spear, through vainly crossed shield, he quite did pierce. Cool. But that proud Paynim forward came so fierce and full of wrath, that with his sharp-edged spear, through vainly crossed shield, he quite did pierce, and had his staggering steed not shrunk for fear, through shield and body eke he should him bear. Yet so great was the puissance of his push, that from his saddle quite he did him bear. He tumbled rudely down to ground did rush, and from his gored wound a well of blood did gush. That's cool. That was fun. That's a fantasy piercing a shield. About a fun one. Yeah, pretty cool. Dismounting lightly from his lofty steed, he to him leapt, in mind to reave his life, and proudly said, Lo, there the worthy meed of him that slew Sansfoy with bloody knife. Henceforth his ghost, freed from repining strife, in peace may passen over Lethe Lake. When morning altars purged with enemy's life, the black infernal furies do slake. Life from Sans Foy thou tookst, Sans Loy shall from thee take. I'm sorry, I'm not doing that good service. I just find their names funny. Sans Foy. Life from Sans Foy thou tookst, Sans Loy shall from thee take. All right. Therewith in haste his helmet gan unlance, till Una cried, "O hold that heavy hand, dear sir, that ever that thou be in place. Enough is that thy foe doth vanquished stand now at thy mercy. Mercy notwithstand, for he is one the truest knight alive. Though conquered now he lie on lowly land, and whilst him fortune favored, fair did thrive in bloody field, therefore of life him not deprive." So the funny part of this, the very funny part of this bit of the story, is that the Archmage was pretending to be the knight in order to potentially do villainous things relating to the woman, to Una. And then all of a sudden, this other knight, Sans Loy, just charges in on his horse with his spear at ready, pierces the shield that the Archmage is using to protect himself, and casts him onto the ground. It's just a lot of divine fortune that the lady has, Miss Una. And said, "Why, Archimaggio, luckless sire, what do I see? What hard mishap is this, that hath thee hither brought to taste mine ire? Are thine the fault, or mine the error is, instead of foe to wound my friend amiss?" He answered not, but in a trance did lay, and on those guileless dazed eyes of his the cloud of death did sit. Which done away, he left him lying so, they would no longer stay. He just gets bodied. But to the virgin comes, who all this while amazed stands, herself so mocked to see by him, who has the garden of his guile for so misfeigning her true knight to be. Yet is she now in more perplexity, left in the hand of that same Paynim bold, from whom her booteth not at all to fly, who by her cleanly garments catching hold, her from her palfrey plucked her visage to behold. But her fair servant, full of kingly awe and high disdain, when as his sovereign dame so rudely handled by her foe he saw, with gaping jaws full greedy at him came, and ramping on his shield did ween the same have reft away with his sharp rending claws. But he was stout, and lust did now inflame his courage more, that from his griping paws he hath his shield redeemed, and forth his sword he draws. And so, Sir, what's his name? Sansloy, right? Yeah, I think so. Sansloy is so turned on by the lady, he's so lusty for her, that he's able to fight off a lion right now, or to challenge it in fair combat at least. Oh, then too weak and feeble was the force of salvage beast. Oh, then too weak and feeble was the force of savage beast, his puissance to withstand, for he was strong, and of so mighty course, as ever wielded spear in warlike hand, and feats of arms did wisely understand. If stoons he pierced through his chopped chest, with thrilling point of deadly iron brand, and launched his lordly heart. With death oppressed, he roared aloud, whilst life forsook his stubborn breast, and he's dead. Who now is left to keep the forlorn maid from raging spoil of lawless victor's will? Her faithful guard removed, her hope dismayed, herself a yielded prey to save or spill. He now lord of the field, his pride to fill with foul reproaches and disdainful spite, her wildly entertains, and will or nill bears her away upon his courser light. Her prayers not prevail, his rage is more of might. And all the way, with great lamenting pain, and piteous plaints her filleth his dull ears, that stony heart could riven have in twain. And all the way she wets with flowing tears, but he enraged with rancor nothing hears. Her servile beast yet would not leave her so, but follows her far off, nay aught he fears, to be partaker of her wandering woe. More mild and beastly kind than that her beastly foe. Okay. So Canto 2 was pretty fun. A little humorous, too. Canto 3, I said. Right? So the recap of Canto 3. Una, the lady, our virginal princess lady, from the beginning of the story, is chasing after the knight. She happens upon a lion who decides to follow her and be her friend, and is a bit of a divine protection, as it were. And also, the lion tends to maul anyone that is a threat to her. So There's a thief that they just happens to come across her while she's sleeping, and the lion kills him, and that earns the bad graces of the ill intent of certain people that live nearby that the thief knows. And then they are traveling further, and the Archmage, that is the reason that the Knight of the Red Cross and the Lady Una have split up in the first place by deceiving the Knight. He shapeshifted himself and comes in as the shape of the Knight, and he's trying to trick her, and then in an act of almost comedy, but it is fun. And then another knight just happens to be riding on his horse with his spirit ready, because he recognizes the Knight of the Red Cross, and thinking it's him, thrusts a spear through his shield and knocks him and incapacitates him, and the illusion disappears. So the Archmage is knocked unconscious at the very least, and potentially dead. Probably not dead, but potentially is. And then the lion tries to kill Sansloy, who again is seeking vengeance on the Knight for the adventure that the Knight went on, who I'm still calling George. And because he's literally just lusty for the lady, Una, kidnaps her. So he defeats the lion, of all things, and then kidnaps our lady. And is presumably taking her away to some castle or some abode of his, where I don't think anything will actually befall her that we expect is his intention. Oh yeah, that's pretty much it so far. What do you think so far? Do you enjoy the story? Canto 4. So it is 11:19 right now. And I am not entirely certain how much longer we want to go. How long is Canto 4? I expect them all to be fairly long. So I am going to go until midnight, and then I'll call it here. And then I will probably continue on Saturday. I have work to do, and I want to make sure I honor that contract. So. Canto 4. To sinful house of pride, Duessa guides the faithful knight, where brother's death to wreak sans joy doth challenge him to fight. Heck yeah, sans joy. Here we go. Young knight, whatever that dost arm is. Young knight. Actually, sorry, we've gone for 3.5 hours. I am not a huge fan of having enormously long streams. We've done 3 cantos. This is a good time to stop. So, Canto 4. We will start with... We've done cantos 1 through 3 and the whole essay introduction. We're going to call it here. Canto 4, we will start on Saturday. I will have to set it up for probably 8 o'clock or so. But yeah, we'll call it here. Thanks for stopping by. And for anyone else that passes by after, I hope you enjoy this reading. And as imperfect as it is, I know it would be better if these were all memorized and completely understood. I am somewhat doing this to force myself to read older works and to expose myself to more things. So I am learning as I go, but I am using what knowledge I recall from the way things are written at the time. So it's a little easier for me to do the swapping of letters as I read, because I'm familiar of it with Shakespeare and all that. But yes, the showdown's going to happen. The story is interesting so far, because it starts with such a high point of action with the literal dragon that is defeated in the cave. And basically, he jumps on the dragon, and as it's flying away, he's able to fight it and slay it and everything. The dragon's got like its babies in its mouth, and then they start spilling out of its mouth to try to attack him and everything. It's things like that. Very, very imaginative and grotesque, like that. And I will have to probably go back and look at that first canto just to drink in the descriptions of the characters a little bit more. 'Cause there's some symbolism, but basically what we got is the archetypes of the knight, and we have our pure virginal lady, who is and there are certain symbols that are present. I've already mentioned the lamb and the lion, etc., things like that, and things that have prevalence and all that. And of course, this is all like within a context of a world that does know Christianity and all that. So these are Christians, Christian characters. But the knight, as far as a reason to separate them, I think is a bit. I think we give this. I think I give it some charity of the kind of story it is, because it is an epic poem, you know. I think I don't exactly remember what he's traveling for in the first place. I think he's just keeping watch over her because she is the daughter of a king. But otherwise, I think the fact is he loves her. He wants to be with her in more ways than one, and she is. And then he's given an illusion. You know, he wants to go on adventures, from what I understand. She's kind of wants him to be safe. And then he's tricked, and then he basically just runs off with his servant, who's not really a character right now, his cowardly dwarf servant. But he runs off because he thinks he saw her, because he saw an illusion of her having sex. And so it so offends him. It so makes him like filled with jealous rage that he runs off. I just happen to not really know what his purpose is, or what he's trying to do, except get as far away from her as possible. So there isn't a drive of what the plot is trying to accomplish for him. So in a way, it's a bit weak on his end. Except that I know he'll do virtuous things as he comes across scenarios. Like, he will live up to challenges, so there will be action with him. And he also demonstrates compassion. So, for example, the tree, he accidentally rips a limb off the tree and it bleeds, and he patches it. Just a nice detail that you could have forgotten. But he accidentally harms the man that was turned into a tree, and he basically heals him. And I think, yes, and if I remember that right, the thing he's given now as a goal is to help heal that man who was turned into a tree. So he wants to undo that spell, if I remember that right. So right now, it's just, there's not an overall goal, but there are these little adventures. So the only thing that's keeping them apart is just this misunderstanding that occurred. And I guess I would think that they don't have a reason to suspect that there's magic at foot. But then the lady does actually does address the Archmage as an Archmage. When she looks at him and he's fallen, and he's no longer in disguise as the man she loves. So she sees that it's the Archmage, and she knows who he is. I don't remember how she would know. Except that they met him when he was just a dude that was offering them shelter for the night. But I don't recall, and it might be there, but I kind of don't recall him ever being identified as an archmage or anything magic of the sort. Just that he was trying to do nefarious things to mess with them before. And I think in a way I don't... So, as far as the overall plot, I think she has a more interesting goal so far. As an overall goal, except it would really just be to get things back to the way they were, which would not be... Would it be it wouldn't be necessarily an exciting new place, right? It would just be back to the way things were, which, granted, was a pretty exciting time because they encountered dragons and such, and all that. But now we're dealing with all these human problems of, like, people lusting after each other or something. So I guess there might be a through line there a bit with, like, who they're encountering after this misunderstanding, because they're dealing mostly with people right now. So that's... I wonder if that reflects on their trials a bit. I don't know. It's sort of a footnote, like that the thief that stumbles in there is he has like a relationship with a whore in the town. It said, and I think it was implied, or maybe it was just outright stated, that was the woman who wanted revenge and was bad-mouthing her after Una left. So now they're being exposed to, like, the similar villainies of lustful people when they just have their misunderstandings. So in a way, that seems to be building upon that. Building upon it by their troubles by adding some perspective. So I think that's all right. But I like the language. It is a bit unfortunate the way I'm choosing to read it right now, because I'm just kind of waffling. I'm just trying to have fun with it, but I think in a way I would prefer, if I did a proper read of it that was recorded and produced, then I would want to choose to go with the accent. I would want to do it with the accent. Some Irish accent of sorts. Although that would, even some Irish accents that's contemporary would not match the way they were said and the words were said at the time. It wouldn't be an authentic read of it anyway. So there's still nuance to that. And I wonder, is there anything you would do? Anything you would do? Wait, how do I forget how to close the second one? Kind of wanted to go up to the beginning again. And what? Unsplit taps. Okay. First book. Yeah, Holy Virgin, Chief of Nine. Yeah. Thy Wicker Nine, perform thy will. Yeah. I have to remind myself of certain things, certain names, etc. Phoebus, all that. Deadly Heaven? I wonder if it is Heaven. But anyway. Alright, sorry. I'm getting a little distracted. We had our framing device to set the tone. I was kind of curious if it would suggest anything about where the plot overall would go. But anyway. Yeah, more accent practice next stream. Let's do it. I will definitely enjoy playing around with the accent more as we go on. It's 11:31. Let's call it a night. Thank you again for coming, and I hope to see you on Saturday. Son of Sonnet.